What is up, guys? My name is Jake Izuski. You can call me Jake Iggy, or Iggy for short, and this is Iggy's Sports Talk. So, the day is finally here. Baseball is back. And it's crazy that I am even saying that. And I am so excited to have the privilege to be able to preview each division for you guys. And I'm going to be joined by ROBBIE HYDE. Now, ROBBIE is a YouTuber, and he posts a lot of very good analytical baseball videos. So go over right now into the search bar on YouTube, search ROBBIE HYDE, go over and subscribe to him. Also, don't forget, go down and subscribe to Iggy's Sports Talk. There's going to be a lot of very good analytical content coming out to give you a full preview of the MLB 2020 season. Also, don't forget to give me a big thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. Now, let's go and listen to the AL East preview.
I mean, when I think of 2019 with the Yankees, I think of a team, well, they had a record amount of injuries last year. I mean, take away those injuries, I mean, they could have won the whole thing last year. And when it came to playoff time, when they were right there in the ALCS, I mean, it looked very evident that they were a pitcher short. And they went and got that pitcher in the offseason, Garrett Cole, who completely dominated them in that ALCS. Take Garrett Cole off that team, put him on the Yankees last year. I mean, you could have had a much different World Series. So, I mean, top to bottom, the Yankees look fantastic. I mean, offense, pitching, both starting and bullpen. One of the best bullpens last year. Starting rotation now. I mean, now you have, a guy like Tanaka who didn't have a great regular season last year, but really stepped it up in the postseason. He's your number two now, behind Garrett Cole, who, in my opinion, probably should have won the Cy Young last year, but that's just my opinion. A guy like James Paxton in the 3 spot, a guy like J.A. Happ in the 4th spot in the rotation, someone like Jordan Montgomery, Domingo Germán, he's not going to be there for this season because of his suspension, but Jordan Montgomery, he can offer something. I mean, and you look at the bullpen, Chapman, well, he's out right now, but he'll be back eventually. Britton, Ottavino, Chad Green. I mean, goodness, top to bottom. I mean, and that's not even talking about the offense yet. I mean, and that's where they got hit a lot last year with injuries. Judge, Stanton. I mean, goodness gracious, Sanchez missed some time last year. But that lineup, top to bottom, it's crazy. Like, it seemed like every one of those guys in that lineup hit at least 30 home runs last year. And then you think of a guy like DJ LeMahieu, who was one of the better players in all of baseball last year, probably had his best season overall with the Yankees. Easily in one of the best offensive second basemen last year, but he can play in other spots as well. Just a crazy good team. And really the only thing that held them back last year, in my opinion, was one ace of a starting pitcher and then all the injuries. Well, they just had a long layoff. And now they only have to worry about a 60-game season plus a postseason. And now they got that ace pitcher. I mean, they're easily a favorite for the World Series this year, in my opinion.
I agree, and ever since they signed Garrett Cole, that's what has been coming out of every Red Sox fan's mouth, even if you're a Red Sox fan as well. And I always like to say this disclaimer anytime I'm talking about the New York Yankees, because as people who are watching the video version of this podcast, we both have Red Sox jerseys on, and it's something where anytime I'm talking about any baseball team, especially the Yankees, I always try to take that bias or that fan bias that I have towards Boston teams and sort of look at it as an MLB fan. And when you really think about the Yankees, as you said, this team is scary. And it seems like for the last 5 years, mostly New York fans have just been killing Brian Cashman, get a pitcher. Where's the pitching? And you just see it year in and year out. They're looking for pitching in the trade deadline, free agency. And if Cashman didn't get a pitcher this next year, I think that Yankees fans would have been asking for him to get fired, even though, as we've talked about before, he is one of the best general managers and smartest general managers in the major leagues. And you really talked about it with the pitching. Guys like J.A. Happ is going to be looking to bounce back. And especially with a guy like Paxton, who's coming off of an injury, he pitched pretty well last year with a 3.82 ERA. And when you really just look at their pitching as well, they were 14th in the league with a 4.31 ERA, and they're probably going to get higher into the top 10, especially with Garrett Cole's help. And it really seems like the Yankees can never catch a break with injuries, because looking into the season, you looked at that rotation and it was scary. And then obviously, right when you were starting to get excited about this team, Luis Severino goes down with Tommy John. And you brought it up perfectly with the offense as well. They're waiting for Judge to come back, and he's probably going to return close to the season. But when you just look at the infield as well, when they lost Miguel Andujar, everybody was like, oh no, what is going to happen? And then when you look at a guy like Gio Urshela, he just came out and broke out. And they were able to rank 4th with a 267 average. So I can really see the Yankees, like you said, potentially getting close to winning 40 games. And when it's a 60-game season, that is a really, really good record.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I mean, it's crazy. I didn't even bring up earlier Gleyber Torres as well. Had 38 home runs last year. It's like, goodness gracious. It's everywhere in this lineup. There's a problem. And even Brett Gardner, solid left fielder. He's getting up there in age, but he's still going to give you good defense out there. But he had 28 home runs last year. Had a good OPS last year. I mean, it's just top to bottom a great team. And it's crazy for me as a Red Sox fan to say, like, I almost kind of felt bad for them, because it was like, wow, this team could potentially be one of the better teams in recent memory that we've seen. And then you see all these injuries happening with them, and it's like, goodness, like, they just could not catch one break last year. They had a record amount of injuries last year. That was a record for a season for guys to go on the injured list. So just, yeah, for pretty tough year for them last year, and to see it end the way it did, for them. But I mean, look how far they got, like, with all those injuries, with the lack of starting pitching. I mean, they're definitely a team to watch. Absolutely.
I mean, you probably could have seen them. You probably could have seen them win around like 108 to 110 games if they had all those guys out there.
Yeah, crazy. And then, but one good thing, about that team last year that held together really well was the bullpen. I believe they ranked second in wins above replacement among relievers. Just solid bullpen. They'll have Chapman back, like I said. I mean, that bullpen's still going to be very, very tough. Yeah, so definitely, I mean, they're my pick to win the AL East for this year easily.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, especially with the competition that they have with the second team that we're going to be going over in the Tampa Bay Rays. But I just wanted to touch on something real quick, something that I'm going to be bringing up throughout all these different division breakdowns is Bakota came out with predictions of the records for the 60-game season. And for the Yankees, they said that they're going to win 36.5 games and lose 23.5 and have a 73% chance of winning the division. But as we've talked about, this team, if everything goes right, you're going to see them in the World Series. And another team which could surprise a lot of people, and in my opinion, is the smartest team in baseball, because when you have the lowest payroll in the MLB, you have a top 3 farm system in the MLB, and you're able to win 96 games over the last 2 seasons, you're doing something right. And that's in the Tampa Bay Rays, and their pitching was the second best in the MLB last year with a 3.65 overall ERA. And when you see guys like Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow, and also Charlie Morton, and then when you also think about the guys that they have in the back end of the rotation, and then you even think about as well the opener approach that they have, it's really a mystery of what you're going to see with this team in terms of pitching day in and day out. So how do you feel, Robbie, about the Tampa Bay Rays?
Well, so with the Rays, to be honest with you, it feels like over recent years, I've started to find the Rays more aggravating than the Yankees, to be in all honesty. That team is always giving everyone trouble. I understand the excitement over the Rays. I do. I mean, you got that 3-headed monster of a pitching staff. Like you said, Glasnow, Snell, Morton. That's as good as it comes. With the Rays, I am proceeding with caution slightly. And that's just me personally, where I can understand where everyone's coming from with it. But they did have a couple of key departures a few key departures this past offseason that maybe numbers-wise doesn't look incredibly bad on paper, but it's kind of what they brought to the team where I thought the players that did leave this past offseason kind of hurt them a little bit. Tommy Pham, love Tommy Pham. Absolutely love that guy. He's a 3-win player, but he's like an energy kind of a player. He's a catalyst kind of a player at the top of the lineup. He's a glue kind of player. When he got traded, Blake Snell, he was not happy about it because that was like a heart and soul kind of a guy of a team. Travis DeArnold, going to the Braves. He was their catcher last year, played very well. He brought consistency at the catcher position. Emilio Pagan going to the Padres for Margot. I mean, he had the most saves for them last year. He was a key piece in that bullpen last year. Of course, they did go with an opener approach closer by committee approach, along with using openers out of that bullpen. So there wasn't really like a solidified closer, but he was kind of that guy. I just worry about those pieces. For Pham, they did bring in Renfroe, who he'll give you 25, 30 home runs, but the guy has a below 300 on base percentage. And when you're taking a guy like Pham out of a lineup that was middle of the road in the major leagues last year, as it was, but when you take Pham out of that lineup, who, in my opinion, is like a catalyst kind of a guy, and you're bringing in a guy, and also Pham, he had around a 370 on base percentage. Take him out, and now you're putting in a guy that has a 285 on base percentage. I mean, I worry about that a little bit, because you're taking a big piece of that lineup out, and yeah, you're putting in a guy that can hit for some power. And they also got Margot as well, who is going to give you some good defense. I just wonder how that offense is. They still have some good pieces, but I wonder how it's going to click, like as a whole. Pitching wise, yes, I love the pitching. That's going to be if they make it far, it's going to be because of the pitching. Morin's coming off career high in innings. Yes, they've had the long layoff, but still career high in innings. He's never pitched that many innings in his whole career. How's he going to do? Blake Snell had a very up and down year last year, dealt with some injuries. He did not look anything like his Cy Young self from 2018. How's he going to do? Glasnow was fantastic last year, only made 12 starts. To me, there's just a lot of question marks with this team. I think they're going to come in second, but I think they are getting a lot of hype, and I understand the hype, but I'm personally proceeding with caution on them a little bit because, and if you want to kind of bring in some radio talk here, they're getting looked at now like, there's a lot of expectations for this team now. They're young guys. How are they going to respond to that? I mean,
very true.
Again, that's just more radio bar kind of talk, but I mean, how are they going to respond to that, especially in a short season when there's not really much time to, build momentum? That is a team. I think there's a ton of talent on that team, and I think they have potential to make a deep playoff run. But I also think there's a potential for that team to maybe disappoint a little bit as well. But I would expect them more to be, one of the better teams this year.
I completely agree, and it's something where I remember the general manager got a lot of flake. Like you said, Blake Snell really did not like that Tony Pham trade over to San Diego, and it's something where I looked at his contract, and the Rays always get very nervous when their payroll gets a little bit high, and they always like to keep it down. And it's something where they're always looking to trade guys when they're a year or two away from free agency just to try and get that value off. And it's always been interesting to watch that team because every time they trade one of those big guys, everybody, especially like guys like when they traded away David Price, when they traded away James Shields back then, everybody was like, oh no, what's going to happen? The team's going to go down. But they're always able to find somebody to recuperate and be able to, overload that talent. And it's something where with Renfroe, it made me really nervous, kind of like you said, with the average. But it's good because he is still around 25. He's still pretty young. And when you look at this roster, You just look at every single guy, you're like, that guy's 24, 25, 26. Nobody's really over 30 other than Charlie Morton, who's 36. And I did really like Tommy Pham being in there to be able to give that veteran presence as well. But when you really look at some of the guys that they already have in that outfield, you talked about Margot, you talked about Renfroe. Then when you look at a guy like Austin Meadows, who in April was the player of the year, player of the month. And then when you look at the guy that they got from, I think it's either Korea or Japan, I can't 100% remember, but it's Tusago. This kid hit like 36 home runs in the league, and it's going to be really interesting, obviously, how he recuperates or gets used to MLB pitching. But you look at also guys like Yandy Diaz and Brendan Lowe. They have some stacked guys who it's going to be really interesting how they develop, and they're still pretty young. And especially with the 60-game season, I think you're not going to really be able to see what they're fully able to do. If you gave them 162, some of these guys would be able to get out of those slumps that they potentially have in the first half of the season and really be able to break out. When you look at what Coda said for this team, they're supposed to win 32 games and lose 27, and they have an 18% chance of the playoffs. But the one advantage that I think the Rays have over everybody, and this is what I'm going to touch on a little bit with the Red Sox as well, because now that they have Chaim Bloom, who started the openers approach with the Tampa Bay Rays, openers approach is very underrated, and I think in a lot of MLB fans' minds, and it's something that's going to become very popular, because when you have a guy that comes in every 2 innings, the batters aren't able to get the scouting report. They're not really able to think about what this guy's going to be throwing. So I think that they're going to be one of the best teams in the league, and it's going to be interesting how those young guys really develop, like you said, but it's going to be interesting in the AL East.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we touched up on the Rays as much as we could right there. I mean, I agree with you. There's a lot of pieces. I mean, one thing that, is underrated is their player development, is their scouting, the coaching staff. They're able to get a lot out of these guys. Like I said, I just, there are a few question marks with me. I'm more optimistic about those question marks than I am pessimistic. I just know for me personally, like when I hear a lot of people are high on a team, and it seems like every time I buy into that team as well, they just go and then they just disappoint me. But I think the Rays, they're very talented. There's a ton of good pieces. They could absolutely make a run. I mean, I'm not denying that, but I'm also saying, kind of pump the brakes a little bit, because, they did have some key departures, and I wonder how they're gonna, do this year without those guys. So, but I'm expecting a lot out of them.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting, especially with another team that, like the Red Sox. I mean, like I said, they're another team that are going to be using the opener approach, and especially with the lack of pitching depth that they do have. That's the one thing that everybody is really nervous about. Anytime you talk about the Red Sox, you're like, well, they don't have Chris Sale, and we don't know when Eduardo Rodriguez is going to be coming back. He's still waiting to get that negative test of COVID. But when you look at this team's record last year, 84-78 after coming off of a 108 World Series winning season. And it was so disappointing. And especially when you look at the pitching was the Achilles heel for the Red Sox last season, ranked 19th with a 4.70 ERA. And it'll be really interesting to see how guys like Colin McHugh coming off of his injury will perform. Guys like Ryan Weber, who's going to be coming into the rotation and did pretty well last season. But like I said, they're going to be using a lot of openers. But a guy to really watch is Nathan Eovaldi. Now, everybody has been on this guy's butt ever since he signed a $17 million a year contract with the Red Sox last season. It's so funny how it can just flip on a guy. One year, everybody is praising this guy after his amazing performance in the World Series, and they're like, this guy deserves $20 million. And even the Houston Astros, the Red Sox and the Houston Astros were fighting back and forth to grab him in free agency. But he's a guy, when you look at his spring training, 12 strikeouts, no hits allowed, no runs allowed, and from what I've seen in the inter-squad games, nobody is able to hit Nathan Eovaldi.
Yeah. He is definitely, and I've read this in other places too, but to me, he's the key guy, for for the Red Sox this year, along with, someone like an Eduardo Rodriguez when he comes back eventually. They have no pitching. I mean, they got nothing. They're playing with, pieces of string here. Like there's really not much there. It's, when you lose guys like a Chris Sale, David Price, and Rick Porcello was pretty bad last year, but the guy gave you innings. And so, that was, pretty respectable in that part. So it definitely the starting rotation. If the Red Sox want to do anything this year, their starting rotation is going to be the make or break on this team. I do like some guys that could maybe fill in here. I am a little more on the optimistic side with Ryan Weber. He's been kind of a bounce around kind of a guy, like a minor league kind of a guy, but he's a guy where he throws a lot of strikes. He works quickly. His ERA was a little high last year, but his FIP was lower than his ERA, so that suggests he pitched better than what his ERA actually showed. Renicky really likes him. He's come out and said, like, I love how he just throws a lot of strikes. He just attacks the zone, and he gets a lot of ground balls. He's not going to overpower anyone, but I think that's a guy where if he comes in, gives you an ERA somewhere, maybe 4.3, I think that is really what this team could need. Just some guy that can give you some innings, that can maybe get you through 5 or 6 innings to start, something like that. I think Ryan Weber has the potential. And, again, I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit. It is Ryan Weber. He hasn't really proven much in his career, and I understand that. But if I were to pick a guy that could maybe, really surprise some people, maybe he could end up having a good year. This is a kind of a year where it could really make him look good. I'm worried about Martin Perez. I mean, the numbers, it's like when you try to look for some positive things from last year, he had an ERA like in the low 5s. But there's not really much positive. He got hit around a little bit, especially in the second half. He did increase his strikeouts per 9, but still, it's still not very high. Like the previous year, I think it was around 5 strikeouts per 9, and then last year it bumped up to around 7 per 9. Still not great. Give up a lot of hits. He kind of got away from his cutter a little bit in the second half last year. I'm not really sure what was going on there. If I were to be optimistic about Martin Perez, I would say, Dave Bush, he's the official pitching coach now for the Red Sox, big on analytics. I think Martin Perez, I think he's a guy that can give you some innings. I think he's still trying to like unlock something a little bit. And I think he's still trying to figure something out, whether it's, pitch selection in certain counts, command at times. That's definitely been a thing for him. But I think if one guy can help him, it's Dave Bush. But then you got someone like a Brian Johnson as well. I mean, he's had some good moments. A couple years ago, he was pretty solid, ERA in the low 4s. Pitched around 100 innings in 2018. Wasn't very good last year, had some injuries. I mean, there's just a lot of guys that could maybe do something on this team, but then there's also the potential for it to be a complete dumpster fire. And another guy you mentioned, Colin McHugh, that's an X factor kind of a guy. When's he gonna be good to go? That's who knows. I mean, there's just so many what ifs with the starting pitching.
I completely agree, and I think the offense is going to carry this entire team, and it's so funny. Nobody thinks that the Red Sox offense is going to do anything without Mookie. Oh no! Now that the Red Sox lost Mookie, the season's over. Well, remember JD Martinez, Xander Bogaerts, also Jackie Bradley Jr., who's been hitting the ball really well so far in this summer camp. And then when you also look at a guy who could, in my opinion, really break out, Alex Verdugo. He's a guy, and you don't really think about a lot of times in analytics, they don't really bring in the whole factor of the motivation of the guy, the drive of the guy. And when you really think about it, he has so much pressure on him. Red Sox fans are looking for him to be a Mookie Betts kind of caliber guy because he's essentially replacing him. And when you think about it, this guy has been down in Fort Myers ever since the coronavirus started. And he's been working his butt off. I've seen on his Instagram, he's been in the cage. He's been hitting with Xander Bogaerts as well. And Bogaerts said Verdugo is the real deal. And so I think that it's going to be really interesting, obviously, how the outfield really plays out, because they also do have Kevin Pillar. But the one thing that I think that the Red Sox have over everybody in the AL East is their bench. And when you look at it, let's say that Mitch Moreland needs a break. Let's put Michael Chavez in there. If Jose Pariza needs a break, let's put Michael Chavez as second. And then Jose Pariza can play anywhere in the infield, anywhere in the outfield. And it's the same thing with Kevin Pillar. Let's say one of the outfielders need a break. Well, let's slot Pillar in there. There's so many different options for the Red Sox on the bench, and they're all productive guys, because usually when you look at most teams' bench, you're like, oh, shoot, well, I think that guy's not really going to be as good. But it's really productive. And I think that the Red Sox are going to be close to 500. I don't think a lot of people are thinking that they're going to have a losing record, and that's sort of what Pacoda put them as. They put them at 30-30 with a 19.8% chance of making the playoffs. I really see this team surprising a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. With the offense, I mean, that is definitely the one thing that the Red Sox do have going for them, and that it's an offense to where if the starting pitching can do enough, it's an offense that can also do more than enough that can keep you in games. Absolutely. Bogaerts, Devers had career years last year. Verdugo had a very solid year last year in around 100 games, hit around like 290, 10 home runs, decent OPS, no Mookie Betts, but a guy that can really fill in and give you some good production.
It's something where when you look at another team like the Toronto Blue Jays, who in my opinion are really going to surprise a lot of people, and ever since they signed Hyun-Jin Ryu and then they got Travis Shaw, and then when you see some of the guys that they have, these young guys like Bo Bichette, Kevin Biggio, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., it's something where a lot of people were criticizing this team at the start of this offseason, and now when you really look at everybody previewing this next season, like, oh, Blue Jays are going to be the most surprising team in the league. I'm like, wow, finally people are opening their eyes to this Toronto Blue Jays team. And their team last year that was 67-95. And when you look at how they were really able to just rejuvenate that rotation with, like I said, the signing of Ryu, Tanner Roark, and then when you look at a guy like Chase Anderson as well. But Ryu, wow, 2.32 ERA in 2019. And same with Anderson, had a breakout year. It'll be really interesting to see how this rotation will really be able to perform. And then when you look at the bullpen as well, it's mediocre. But I really think that this rotation and these young guys are really going to surprise a lot of people.
Yeah, and one underrated piece that I really liked that they added was Tanner Roark. If you look at the innings pitched from starting pitching last year for the Blue Jays, I think they had one guy who pitched more than 150 innings, if you don't count Stroman, who was traded. They only had one guy who pitched more than 150 innings. Tanner Roark is a guy that can give you some innings, effective innings. And then, Ryu, absolutely, ace-level kind of a guy. Hopefully he can keep the injuries at bay. That's something that has kind of dogged him in his career a little bit. Chase Anderson as well. The only problem with Chase Anderson is he tends not to go very deep into games. He'll make his starts, but it's just a matter of him, getting past the fifth inning, trying to get to the sixth inning. That's one thing that kind of struggled with a little bit last year, high pitch counts very early on. The potential's there. One guy, Matt Shoemaker. This guy was pitching incredible last year before another injury, an ACL tear. Like, when do you ever see ACL tears besides Andrew McCutchen last year? I feel like you don't really ever hear about that in baseball. Right. Football, obviously, but it's like that guy cannot catch a break. If I were to make a list of guys that benefited from the long layoff, definitely Matt Shoemaker. He was pitching lights out in that first month. That's a guy that could potentially, if he can just stay on the mound, that is a guy who could be a two in your rotation. There's a lot of potential there in that Blue Jays rotation.
And then when you look at the offense as well, I mean, not a lot of people are really focusing on the move of Vlad Guerrero Jr. From third base to first base, but I think that will really give him a chance to save his energy and focus more on hitting. And I think we're going to see Vlad Guerrero Jr. have a monster season, but especially when you look at a lot of these young guys. I keep on bringing up the point, if there was a 162-game season where these young guys were able to get that slump out or really be able to work on stuff over the season, we'd be able to see this Blue Jays team really be able to flourish. And in my opinion, they could have been a team better than the Red Sox. When you have such a shortened season, when you look at the PECOTA prediction, they're supposed to win 28 games and lose 31, and they have a 9% chance of the playoffs. And that's just the one thing that I think the youth will really hurt them in some situations. But I think with such a small sample size, you're going to see these guys improve over time very well. And especially like a guy, Bo Bichette, who had a very, very fast start to his rookie season. And I think he is going to have a monster season.
Yeah, absolutely. Vlad Jr., I mean, I don't know why it took him so long to move to first. I mean, I think he should have been a first baseman, a few years ago. I mean, I don't know, really. I mean, they were trying to help him there at third, but yeah, I mean, definitely a better first baseman for sure. And if they can, get a good guy that can maybe platoon with him at first too, and maybe he can DH some days, I think that'd be good. His thing is his bat. That's what you need. Is if he can do enough at first, Vlad's gonna, it's Vlad Jr. He mashes. He's gonna be the centerpiece of that offense. Bo Bichette, he's electric. Love Bo Bichette. Tons of swagger with that guy. Love it. Hit for average. Definitely can hit for some power. He's got some speed. Very, very exciting player. One guy I love, and I don't know, maybe it's because I kind of like the smaller things with some of these prospects. I loved Cavan Biggio last year. Absolutely loved Cavan Biggio, not because he's Craig Biggio's son, but this guy, rookie season, on-base percentage around like 360, very good for a rookie, very good. He can draw a walk. He gets on base. He's a mature player for his age. I thought he wasn't the Rookie of the Year voting, but yeah, very underrated player there. He is someone I'm looking forward to watching this year, as well as Vlad and Bo Bichette. They signed Travis Shaw. That could end up being lightning in a bottle. Maybe they see something where they can fix him. He just hit 30 home runs a couple years ago for the Brewers, the mayor of Ding Dong City. I mean, there is a lot of potential with the Blue Jays. Definitely, yeah, there's a lot of good pieces in that lineup.
And then when you look at a team like the Baltimore Orioles, unfortunately, there isn't too much stuff to talk about with this team just because they're just not there yet. They're a team that is just waiting on their farm system to develop a little bit more, and they didn't really catch a break either with their best player in Trey Mancini being diagnosed with cancer, and he's not able to unfortunately play. And that was a very sad sort of report that came out. But when you look at a team that last year lost 108 games, they have a very thin rotation, but they have a guy in John Means who was able to pitch a 3.60 ERA last year. But when you really just look at the offense as well, there's not a lot of pieces to be excited about other than maybe a young guy like Austin Hayes who you could look to develop. And maybe they'll bring up Ryan Mountcastle.
Love that.
And when you look at a guy like Anthony Santander, who was actually able to break out last year, and he's a guy who I didn't know his name before this past season, and he was able to hit 261 with 20 home runs. So what are you looking at with the Baltimore Orioles?
I mean, really with the Orioles this year, I think it's kind of see what you got. I think bring up Mountcastle, see what he can do. Why not? I mean, it's a throwaway year for the Orioles. I do feel bad in the aspect that they couldn't have those 160 games to really, plug in some younger guys. Maybe even Adley Rutschman could have maybe gotten some kind of exposure. Probably not. That would have been more likely, if anything, a September call-up. but even then, it's still very early for him. I just feel more bad for the fact that, yes, they are in a team completely in rebuild mode, and they didn't have that full season to really just plug in some guys and just see what they could do. So, I mean, really at this point, use the 60 games, see what Mountcastle can do, see if Meads can improve, see what Hayes can do. There's really not much for the Orioles, to be honest. They'll be the punching bag of the AL East for sure.
There you go, guys. That is the overview of the AL East. Who do you see as the most surprising and most disappointing team in this division? For me, the most surprising is the Toronto Blue Jays, and the most disappointing is the New York Yankees.
Not trying to be biased, but I think the Red Sox have potential to be very surprising. If that starting pitching can just get something going. The reason I say surprising is just because so many people have written them off. The Blue Jays are very exciting. Of course, they have young talent. I personally still think they're a year, maybe two away. But just because of the fact that people have written the Red Sox off, and of course, the starting pitching looks completely mediocre on paper, but if that coaching staff can get something out of that starting pitching, who knows? Because they have the offense, they have a very decent bullpen. There's a lot of good pieces in the bullpen. They even have a guy like Bobby Dahlbeck who can come up and maybe do something. There are pieces on that team to where if they just do enough of the pitching, most likely, probably not, but they could do something. Maybe a second wild card. Very possible. To me, I think I kind of really gave it away earlier. I think the Rays have the most potential to be the most disappointing, just because they are. If you go on Twitter right now, Jared Carrabis picking the Rays, Draftneck Mark on YouTube picking the Rays. Well, actually, no, he picked the Mets, of course, to beat the Rays in the World Series. No surprise there. But everyone you're seeing Rays, and it's like, oh boy, hey, this is hey, pump the brakes a little bit. Look at what they did this offseason. I would say, yeah, they did add some decent pieces, but they lost some really good pieces as well, like I mentioned earlier. I definitely think they have a chance to be disappointing, mainly just because they've been so hyped up. I think a lot of people are expecting them to win 40-plus games, but I think they're going to be more in line with what Pacoda said. It was really funny because I was looking at their schedule. I was kind of going through, all right, 2 wins in this series, sweep here, and I think they'll lose 2 out of 3 here. I came out to it was 32 or 33, and then I looked at Pacoda. I was like, oh, okay, so yeah, that looks right in line. If they finish with 33 wins, that should be very close to a wild card. I think people might find if they get like a second wild card, I think people might find that disappointing. Just because they've been so hyped up lately, especially, I get why, but I'm not going to be surprised if they, somehow drop down to, maybe 31 wins, something like that. So that's what I would say. I'm probably going to be wrong, but that's what I would say.
I think this division is going to be one of the most competitive and interesting to watch. So right there, guys, is the preview of the AL East. So that's a wrap for this division preview. I hope you guys really did enjoy this video and were able to learn a lot from all the analytical and informative information that Robbie and I gave you to get you ready for the MLB 2020 season. I hope you're getting as excited as I am for this season to start. Please don't forget, go over and subscribe to ROBBIE HYDE. He posts some great MLB content, and he's going to be helping you get ready for the MLB season as well, and going to be posting a lot of videos throughout the 2020 season. Also, please go down and subscribe to Iggy's Sports Talk. I've been putting a lot of effort so I can get you guys as ready for the MLB season as possible. Also, give this video a big thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. So, that is it, like I said, for this division preview. look for the next preview so you can get ready for this next MLB season. Thanks, guys.